This is 10X Recruiting, a podcast from Metaview. Let's get after it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10X Recruiting brought to you by Metaview. We got Metaview's CEO, Siadhal, in the building. Siadhal, what's up, man?
What's up? I'm good.
Look at you, you're learning. So we're going to do something a little bit different today to where we're just going to talk about what we're seeing. And we got a couple of topics on the agenda. Sal, the first one I want to start with is hiring recruiters. And so I think there's a narrative right now that there's so many recruiters on the market, which I think is true. Yet when I'm talking to companies, it's like one of the slowest moving roles for them to hire, regardless of the stage and size. And so the things that I'm hearing from companies is like, one, there's just kind of like this delta between what the market has and what they want. And so that delta includes work ethic. It includes attention to detail. It includes analytics or some sort of focus on like metrics and data. And then it also includes just kind of like having an understanding of how to be native with AI today. Curious, like, are you seeing this as well? I got a couple takes on this, but like, are you seeing this as well?
Yeah, we are. I get requests for recommendations of recruiters all the time, and I sometimes give some, of course. But it's like very common that people are struggling. We've been going through a bit of a spike on recruiting as well, and we're very happy to have landed a great recruiter of our own recently. It's really interesting. You're glomming onto like mismatch of essentially capabilities that people are finding within these recruiters on the market, which I like. Let's bat it around. I agree. But my sort of gut is that recruiters have been so battered recently over the last like 3 or 4 years with like layoffs at like even great recruiters at really strong companies getting laid off. So like the temptation to sort of like hold down something that's like, maybe if you were someone who survived those rifts or something at this company, to then think, well, and like on average, we've got to at least accept that on average, the top performing recruiters survive the rifts, even if there's going to be exceptions. Some people got rid of, and it's just like people on a spreadsheet that again get rid of, like heartless as that seems. But on average, like the best recruiters will have stayed put during those rifts, and maybe it's just like that risk appetite just isn't there to move.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to people about this, it's one of the first things I tell them is like, oh, I got reached out to, some of this XYZ company reached out to me, right? Insert hot company name. And I go, oh, like, how's the relationship building going? They're like, well, like, I'm getting to know them. Like, they're about to extend an offer. And I always tell them the same thing, which is like, man, it takes a long time to build those relationships, And you're exactly right, Siadhal. It's like, I would describe it as a low trust market to where you'll have people like you, founders on the other side being like, oh, like come work here, like things are going great, pitching like all of like the best stuff and like not getting any details like on the warts and where those concerns are. And then if you're a recruiter and you have survived, through this brutal last few years, you have like built up a ton of cred and a ton of like internal like political will inside of your company that you have to go build from zero. And that takes years to rebuild.
Yeah, I think it's a super risky proposition. I don't want to like talk myself out of like hiring some recruiters here, but I get it. I get that there's like that risk on the side of things. But what were you saying about so you're saying sort of work ethic, data, AI native, what's like say more, like what
attention to detail. I think attention to detail is honestly the thing that comes up the most.
But why is that? What's like the now? Why is that? And why now? Like that? Why wasn't that true 5 years ago?
I think the bar was lower before.
Okay. What's changed?
So in 2022, I guess, is when really the layoffs like started to get vicious and gruesome. And so companies were forced to do more with less. And what most companies realized was we are actually moving faster with fewer people. And so I think the thing that really changed is companies are just now willing to wait on these roles. It's, yes, they are desperate, but no, they do not want warm bodies.
Yeah. Okay.
And in recruiting, there was always kind of like this, like, oh, it's recruiting sort of a thing. So like we can deal with some of and it's like, no, like you're pitching the company to our future employees who are building the company.
So to paraphrase, what you're saying is the push for talent density within the company as a whole is actually making it harder for recruiters to is making it harder to hire recruiters, because the responsibility, if you're responsible for talent density of the organization, it's very different to you're responsible for having us hire 5,000 people we need to hire this year. Let's get as many butts and seats as we can to help with the actual sourcing and recruiting of those people. That tracks. I can imagine
that's much more articulate. That's exactly what I'm saying. And when I'm talking to these companies about it, they're all looking for the silver bullet. Like, who's the best person to hire for this? I'm like, that person has a job, right? They're killing it. And so like what I keep telling companies is like, I actually feel like you need to go pull somebody who has kind of the raw ingredients, but who has not done the job before.
Yeah. If I relate it to some other hires that we've made recently, obviously I think everyone we hire is amazing, but I do think there is a distinction between when you're making like N of one hires. Like if you're making a small number of hires of a certain job function versus you're making lots of them, you can take more of a portfolio approach. You can take more of a, listen, I'm going to hire some spiky people. They might have big weaknesses in some areas, but as long as they have big strengths elsewhere, and I'm going to have a portfolio of these people, and overall, on average, they're all amazing, but I don't mind these weaknesses. Depending on the scale of the company, if you're making fewer recruiter hires, then you're less willing to give up maybe on something like have spiky people. You need these more rounded situations. Because I would argue that what you reeled off at the top of the show, if there needs to be this, there needs to be this, there needs to be this, there needs to be this. It's like I'll have a little bit of sympathy with people like, hey, you're looking for a unicorn here. Like at the end of the day, that you're going to have people who are like spike in certain areas. You might spend a long time looking for the person who is excellent at all of those things.
Well, you're hiring in sales right now. So I don't agree with that. You're hiring AAs right now. And if I told you that, the AE didn't have high attention to detail, wasn't as articulate in live conversations, wasn't able to like pull good examples when you're you're not hiring that person.
I agree with that. But if you then said they need to be good at data analysis, I'd be like, okay, fine, whatever. Then with that, if their CRM hygiene wasn't amazing, I'd be like frustrated, which is a certain type of attention to detail. But I would still be like, if they can get on the pitch and get me some W's on the board, then I would still 100% do it. That's what I mean. I think it stands to, if I take the equivalent from like that sales example and apply that to recruiting, a recruiter who's like phenomenal on the phone with getting to know candidates and being persuasive but might not be actually as AI native, like, I think there's value there. I think that's a skill that's going to survive this AI revolution. And hey, much as it's crazy for someone not to be leveraging these AI tools, and obviously different people will get to it at different points in their whatever, as different points of the future, there's still value there. I guess that's what I'm saying.
The thing you're mentioning though is like wins on the board. And I think wins on the board historically for recruiting has been offers accepted. And the shift to talent density, it's no longer about offers accepted, right? Yeah, it's truly about like, are you hiring people that are impacting the business? And that becomes like the crux of the thing. Like one of the questions that people have been asking recently, which I love, which is like, who's your best hire? Just asking a recruiter like who your best hire is so illuminating. Because are they able to articulate like how they thought about the problem the business had, what the search had, like how they went through all of the strife in the search, found the person, and then also why that person was ultimately successful? Like, can they break down what the magic actually is? And that's what I think a good recruiter is versus butts and seats. And I think a lot of recruiting has been butts and seats for the last few years.
Yeah. Agree. And the success we've had on the recruiter side actually tallies to that really well. When you're getting wins on the board, we actually started working with a recruiter in a freelance capacity initially, and we developed a really good relationship. We developed a lot of trust, developed calibration that's hard earned, to the point where it became like crazy not to have the person in the company and sort of like batting for us 100% of the time. So I think maybe that's also a little hack, because I think, again, when you go to these N of one hires, especially if you're the hiring manager thinking about a recruiter to work with, you're like, holy shit, I'm gonna have to invest so much time in making sure this person understands me, including the shit I'm not good at or the things I don't get, and like all these sorts of things, that like you really want to sort of get that hire right, because it's such a close partner, especially if you're scaling fast. Obviously, your number one partner in the company is your recruiter. I mean, in my case, literally, I sit beside Like of all the people in my company that I could sit beside, the person I sit beside is the recruiter, because that's what I spend so much time doing. So like it is a high stakes hire in many cases, and if you can get a few almost like work trial-esque exposure to this person, especially given so many of them might be at small agencies or working as a freelancer, that could be a thing.
Yeah, I love that. All right, I want to transition to the next topic that I had. So did you see Gokul Rajaram's post yesterday about non-regrettable attrition?
I did, yes.
Okay, so let me just read this for the audience. So the title of the post is non-regrettable greater than 5%. And he says, I don't care how cracked your team is. If your team is bigger than 50 people and your annual non-regrettable attrition is less than 5%, you're not doing a good job of increasing talent density. This applies to every sub-team that's greater than 50 people, including engineering. For context, a very large, spectacularly performing public tech company has 10+% non-regrettable attrition in their eng team, which is widely regarded as one of the best teams on the planet. TLDR, you need to raise the bar every year by weeding out the bottom 5%, period. What do you think about that?
I think that is a good sign. I think I definitely like hang out with founders sometimes who sort of fetishize the idea of like stuff. So it's not new. I would say it's not new, basically. And I think I feel like it's like a Jack Welch sort of thing from back in the day where they would literally fire to a quota, many sort of high performing like non-tech businesses. So yeah, not new. I think it probably is a good sign. I don't think you should take it as a negative sign if you're essentially firing people in your company, other than that it's unpleasant to do and to have happen to you. But yeah, I think I broadly agree. And I think if you're not seeing non-regrettable attrition, there's probably only there's two things that are the most likely. The least likely is that you're crushing it every single time, and like everyone you've hired is amazing and at parity with each other. That's the least likely. It's possible, but it's very unlikely. The most likely is you lack the fortitude to part ways with the folks who aren't good enough. And then the second most likely is maybe the whole team is not actually that good, and therefore it's sort of not a problem. Or maybe actually, if I'm going to add one more, actually, the third most likely is maybe you're not hiring aggressively enough. Like you are being so diligent about every single hire to the point where you have like hella false negatives, where you're essentially rejecting people who could have been a fit because you're so scared about making a bad hire that actually you never sort of bring them to the company. And you'll have known from your DoorDash days. I think Tony talked about he thinks he has like a 70% hit rate on the hires that he makes, right? So, really you should be having like a 30% attrition rate then. So I think there's also an option maybe that you're just hiring too slowly, because you're being so focused on getting every single one right, which you're never going to do anyway. So, let's release the brakes a little bit and accept some of some of the negative consequences.
So it seemed obvious to me too, but then I spent some time with a very well-known talent leader this weekend, and then another today, and I got essentially like two widely different views, both public companies. So the one I talked to today said that they're on track for like 16% non-regrettable attrition in the company, and that was like on the base, like on all, and she's like, yeah, on the entire employee base. That's huge. And then I thought like, holy shit, like people got to be in fear for their lives at a place like that. Like that is like,
so these are public companies. So not like growing. It's not like they're not like doubling year on year in terms of headcount or anything crazy like that.
well, but but this is where like backfills, like it's hard to, when you're firing that many people, backfills is such a big portion of hiring. And so like, that was kind of the joke we made was like, well, like the recruiting team is probably like the safest team as you guys go through this phase, because like you're going to keep hiring. Anyways, her view of the world was like, we're ruthless, and we're trying to like be as clear about that with people in the interview process of like, if you work here, like the standards are insanely high. Other recruiting leader over the weekend who I was with said the exact opposite, which is the HR team essentially puts so much friction into the machine when somebody wants to fire somebody that you can't get them out without like perfect documentation over the course of like 6 months. And so where that feeds for them is like they actually are moving slower on hire, and significantly slower, to the point to where it's like, to your point around false negatives, they're worried about like, we actually think we're missing people who we should be taking bets on because like you just don't have all of the information when you're making hires. So I actually think this is something that companies need to spend more time on. Like I don't ever agree with like setting a target and saying this is what the target should be. But I do agree with saying like, well, that seems low or that seems like really high, like holy shit. And at least having it be a barometer check for what's happening inside the company and essentially like a little bit of a gauge on are we moving too fast or too slow in our hiring process.
Yeah. It is a muscle like people need, like to be able to identify what is and isn't sort of essentially slowing the team down or, taking up like essentially consuming opportunity cost, because it could be someone else doing that thing. Funny enough, actually, you think the same thing applies when people review companies where, let's take Metaview as an example. Our metrics are pretty good. But actually some people would look at some of those metrics and say, well, they're a little bit too good. Like, shouldn't more customers be churning? Because you're probably not getting out in front of enough customers who are like maybe a fit. And some of them indeed would be a good fit. And so actually the net sort of present value of your company would be higher if you were more aggressive and had higher churn. And so like, it's sort of, you could argue it's sort of the same with hiring, right? You should get more aggressive with this stuff, give people a shot. But accept that, of course, the attrition isn't to be feared, as long as, again, it was what I really liked about what you said about the first buddy of yours over the weekend that you spoke with. It's really clear during the interview process. We had the same thing on this pod earlier where it was made really clear to the candidates, like, this is how it's going to work, and like it's your choice. So I think as long as that sort of like social contract almost is there, then I think it obviously benefits the people who could do great things but otherwise might not get the shot.
It's hard to fire people. Like that's the thing. It's like it is hard to fire people unless you institutionalize it.
Yeah. The only thing I'd say in the like, why are HR acting like this? Probably because they're being overly conservative against some type of like legal issues or something
of
like
course.
this.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd say that's the main thing. But like, if we had that person, or if we had someone from that company's the HR team on this call, they'd probably also be throwing in some other reasons, like, well, because actually we think if we can avoid this climate of fear, it's better for people's performance overall, and that's like something we think is really important, because we think in a creative industry that we're in, actually people don't perform that well when there's like a lot of fear in the air, and we think psychological safety is important.
Do you buy that style?
I think it's a spectrum, and like I think like highly fear-driven cultures result in not the best outcome. And I think there's also such thing as like a culture market fit as well. I think in maybe certain industries where you attract a certain culture, a certain type of person will do the best work of their lives in a certain industry, will be a different person who does the best work of their life in another industry, and then the cultures adapt accordingly. So I think I'm very anti any sort of like categorics, like, no, that is not true at all. I think you get some of these things gets pushed to absurdity, which is an example of like never firing anyone. Like you've lost track of it here. Like you're not actually thinking about what the job of the HR team is to do. And you've sort of like obsessed over this thing of like not letting this one bad thing happen. And you're forgetting about all the other bad things. Obviously that's like negative, and you get too many, frankly, like people who aren't thoughtful in the company, you end up with these silly situations, which I'm sure what you described, I'm sure what your friend is experiencing is like suboptimal. But I don't think it means, I still think there's other places on the spectrum where some of that is of some value.
I think that's a good take. I mean, I will tell you from experience, it's almost always HR having some sort of legal concern, right? And that concern almost never manifests into reality. And if it does, those things become like abundantly clear, which you saw very fast in the feedback loop.
It's so funny because obviously like everyone's been getting so up to speed on all the different biases out there that like legitimately exist. But really what that's an example of like a loss aversion bias. It's like the chance that we might get sued is so high in my mind, even though that might be like some portion of money that is so much smaller than what we might gain by having a higher performing team, that you're just obsessing with the thing you might lose. And it's actually like it is a form of bias that is being exhibited there.
Yep. You want to talk about compute?
Yeah, computer use. So biggest thing happening in AI probably, well, right now, but they're sort of launched. It's been around in some corners, but basically OpenAI really got behind it about 3 weeks ago or so, is computer use. So what computer use is a new modality, or essentially new protocol, whereby AI can actually use a computer on your behalf. So I'm going to take a bit of a segue, and then let's sort of come back to why this is so interesting. One of the things that's also going on in AI is people are thinking a lot about robotics. And there's two camps in when people are thinking about robots. They're thinking the robot should look like a human, or the robot should just be purpose built for like a particular task that you want a robot to do. And the people who say robots should look like a human, the reason they say that is because we've terraformed this planet. We've made this planet. We as humans can move over these land, move over the, walk the streets, use the appliances in our house, fold the laundry. We've created the world to be like a good UX for humans. So therefore, when we're building robots, we should build them like humans too, because so eventually they can fit into our world. This is sort of the same thing with computer use, where historically the way we've used AI is almost like in this new paradigm where it goes off and does things in the background and then comes back to us. And there's like a whole black box behind there. We don't know exactly how it's working. And then we get answers back from the AI. Computer use is interesting because it's essentially the AI going and using a computer to do the things that you would do, i.e. navigating websites that you would navigate. So you can now, for example, if you put this in the recruiting context, you can now walk up to ChatGPT, turn on agent mode and say to it, go and find me a former recruiting leader who is now a podcast host, sign into my LinkedIn account and see if you can find them. And it will actually spin up a virtual machine that it will show you, give you a window into. So it will show you, this is my screen. It will navigate to LinkedIn. It will say, oh, damn, I can't get into LinkedIn. Can you sign in for me? It will pass control back over to you. And then you'll sign into LinkedIn. And then it will just go and navigate the internet on your behalf. So I think the reason this is such a big, and in this case, it would find me you probably, because who better what better former recruiting leader podcast host could they find on LinkedIn than you? But the point is this idea that so much of our work as humans is clicking around the browser, basically. AI can now do that. It literally can spoof those clicks and manipulate any website you want it to. And it's just going to get better and better at doing this, to the point where, again, it's just such a good, feel the AI moment where you've asked an AI to do something and it's literally just gone and used your computer without you having to do anything. You go and have a cup of tea, grab a coffee, speak with your buddies. If it's a really long task, go and have a round of golf and come back and the thing will be done. And it will have just used your computer to go and do it. And it's just, it's a real breathtaking moment when you take it for a spin. And I think just a whole bunch of opportunities occur to you when you see it in action.
That's interesting. So to go back to your analogy that kicked it off, which is this is how we've always done it. And so I'm assuming that analogy ties into, we don't actually know what this outcome might be because it's probably going to do things much differently than we've approached the problem.
Well, 100%. I don't know. Yeah. That's even the bigger so what, which is because I'm not telling it, hey, click on the search bar, type in Nolan, I'm not giving the instruction. It is just figuring it out. And so what it'll end up doing, obviously that was maybe a bit of a crappy example, but for any task you give it, it will go and find its own way to complete this. But the point is it has access to all the same tools you do. It has access to whatever, whether it's your LinkedIn account or whether it's go to Figma and design this thing. And so it's just pretty crazy to see it literally figuring out in real time. Oh, this button probably does this. Oh no, it doesn't do that. I was wrong. Maybe I'll click on this thing instead. And it literally gives you this real time, almost like a commentary of what it's doing, and how it's trying to figure out what to do. And of course, it will just get smarter and smarter over time and learn how to use these tools.
Have you used it yet?
Yeah, I use it a lot.
What example, what credentials have you given it?
I've done the example that I've used it for, what I described there, which is essentially some form of list building or searching for candidates. Yeah, searching candidates on LinkedIn. I've used it for essentially reports writing, where if you want it to take rather than just basically survey your knowledge and then pump out a generation in response to my prompts. If you put on this agent mode, it will literally go through and almost create a plan of how it's going to get this information and then go off into the internet onto the internet and find these things. A lot of them don't require credentials. Of course, I gave an example of LinkedIn just because it's so relevant to this audience to think, okay, what would what would I do differently if my team or myself didn't need to be the one scrolling through LinkedIn all the time? But of course, a lot of the internet is not behind a sign in. So yeah, report writing has been a prominent one. Yeah, there's a ton.
And then with the sourcing example, how was your output?
Not great yet. So and the other thing about it is it takes time. Literally, you can watch it. It's sort of probably going at like 2x the speed of a human would when doing this task. So you can think about it in two ways. You can think, well, that's incredibly slow. Like I just want to get I want to say that I'm looking for this person and I want a list returned to me right away. Or you can look at it, well, that's twice as fast as a human. So if I was going to ask, if I wasn't the one that was going to do this task, if I was going to ask someone else to do this task, then actually it's twice as fast as they would have done it. And also it cost me $20 a month as opposed to, $20 every 10 minutes.
Yep.
So it's sort of slow, but as a consumer of the product, if you're just sitting there, it's quite slow. So again, this is not like hey, everyone drop what you're doing. There's like a, productivity hack in town. It's not going to, there are ways that you can use it to do really useful stuff. But I think the main thing I'm encouraging is go and have a play and just think about what this might become in future. Because you're no longer, if this plays out the way it's going to, which is essentially AI intelligence using the internet, AI intelligent entities using the internet just the way human intelligent entities use the internet. And you're going to have lots of people browsing the internet all the time. Some of them will be humans, some of them will be artificial intelligence. That's going to change your work. Sometimes you're just going to ask the AI to do some of these tasks. And so it's just like it's like a thought provoker, I think.
Yeah. One of the pieces of feedback you gave me when I was asking for help on my operator usage, and I was complaining about how long it was taking, I was like, go do something else. Let it run in the background and go do something else. And that has been such an unlock for me, but also challenging. So I'm older school and I like to focus on one problem at a time because that's focusing, I think, is where I get the majority of my work done. And I am finding that with these new tools, the ability to context switch is important, or at least the ability to be able to write down all of the things that you need to do to where if you assign something to AI, not everything is sequential, right? So you could potentially go to the next thing on the list if you're not dependent on the AI. And I've had to think about breaking down these problems more because before you're just kind of well, I do this. And then once I do that, then I come to this thing. Which has been a very interesting and unique unlock for me.
Yeah. And I think that these AI experiences are baking some of that in. And obviously this is new. So we're going to figure out over months/years. But essentially you can think of this as like a cost, both an LLM cost, literally to go and do one of these tasks where the AI agent goes and navigates. That's a costly thing. You're doing a lot of LLM calls, that they are doing a lot of LLM calls to make that happen. And at the same time, it's costly because it's taking time. And so you're not making the progress you want to in the meantime, if you're not working on other things. And so it's expensive. And so the new sort of UX paradigm is increasingly, just as it is with a human, frankly, okay, you've asked me to do this thing, but the AI, before it does anything, will have almost a repertoire of clarifying questions it will ask you. So increasingly almost train you to give good prompts, so that we do know that when I go off and do this work, it's actually going to be useful because it's going to take me time. It's going to cost me money. And that's exactly the way you work with a human, right? You wouldn't just sort of give a coworker a one-line instruction unless you're really in tune with this person. You would probably have a half an hour meeting to really go through, this is what we're talking about, this is how we do it. Now, hopefully we'd have to do that. But even if we did, if it's something that then can get done while everyone else is sleeping, then it will be worth it. So I think, we just, as has been a recurring theme for a lot of our chats, thinking of this as intelligence, which our best proxy for that is how humans work, is a very good go-to way to think about it.
Yeah. All right. Last topic, Sahil, is I want to share something that you and I both heard that we haven't talked about publicly, which is an AI use case that blew my mind. And so I will not use this person's name nor the company, but I will tell the use case. And so essentially what they do, and by the way, this is something I think if you are in recruiting, you should do this right now, like tomorrow. Like this is going to blow the socks off of your management team. So what this person did is they created a custom GPT, which again, don't let your eyes gloss over yet. That's easy, right? It's like takes 5 seconds to do. And what they uploaded in the back end of this custom GPT was all of the information about the product and the company.
That the speaker that they work for.
Correct. Yes, exactly. Then what they did is they uploaded the org chart. Then they updated as part of the org chart what each person works on and what each team does. So kind of like a team mandate sort of a thing. And with every interview that they have on candidates, they use Metaview. And then they take the raw transcript. So think about like 6 hours worth of conversations. In addition to like the intake meeting that they had with the hiring manager, they put it into the custom GPT and they go, hey, tell us what you think about how this person's going to fit in. Like, what are the green flags? What are the yellow flags? What are the red flags? And Sile, when this person showed it to us, I felt like I saw the inside of the Matrix. I was like, holy shit. This is actually the first use case that people are not doing that I felt like, oh my God, like I better start doing this tomorrow. Otherwise, I'm going to become antiquated. What did you think when you saw it and what's your take on it?
I wasn't as blown away as you know. We've talked about it a bunch since then. But the reason that was impressive was because it was really interesting proprietary context that this person was giving the AI, which meant that the AI's generations could be far better. So if you compare that to what most people are, I don't think most people, but sometimes what people do is they ask the AI a question like, hey, you know, the candidate said this, is this candidate a good candidate? It's like, yes, it will give you an answer, but like you are not doing what I would call good context engineering. Your responsibility here is to engineer the context such that the LLM can plausibly give you a really good answer. And so what this was an example of was that it was like really good or really thoughtful context engineering, because now the LLM can actually have a chance of giving you good outputs. I think I would just give the same caveat as with all of these things, which is still like that output needs to be seen as like one of the dots. And I think it can be a really good, i.e. like there's other people that have different opinions and, you know, these LLMs aren't sort of foolproof when it comes to like, despite giving all this context, it doesn't mean they're definitely going to come up with the right answer and the right suggestions. But what it can definitely do is get you thinking, for you said about green flags and red flags, and in this very sort of more like, hey, I'm just floating this for you as something for you to explore. It makes a ton of sense. The ones that I've seen that are like slightly different, but similar to this are more around, you know, if people upload their rubric or really make a really detailed rubric about what they're looking for in a certain role or a certain hire, or even if they sort of bring in 2 candidates at the same time and talk about like what are the relative to these, because the LLMs are good at comparing. Essentially, the less good at sort of like just straight up rating. But if you give it things to compare, it can actually like obviously do really smart things of drawing parallels between things. So I've seen that rubric and candidate comparison works pretty well. What is it about why the org chart? Why is the org chart so valuable in that?
Oh my God. I mean, so I think piece one is when you think about it, it just makes so much sense. Like, what does the org look like? What do these people do here? Right. And what's the mandate of the team? That's just kind of the foundational layer. What I started projecting was they're going to put performance feedback in here pretty soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And then it gets, that's what I mean when I saw the inside of the Matrix was like, okay, I haven't seen anybody do that yet. That is 100% where the puck is going.
For sure.
And so if I was still operating inside of Carta or DoorDash, this would be on the agenda for yesterday. Like, I'm going to have like my 2 best people going and testing this thing in a very small way. So take like one org, right? Take engineering or take sales. We're going to upload all the performance feedback into the custom GPT. And then we're going to take every interview that we record with Metaview and just drop in the entire transcript and just see what this thing starts coming up with.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see what you're saying now. When you say you've seen the inside of the Matrix, you mean the sort of the importance of providing context, sort of the penny dropped, like, okay, so this is what we mean, because it can actually sort of like ground its observations in data that matters to your company.
So this context thing, I got in like a a friendly spat with one of my homies on LinkedIn who was basically calling me a mid context engineer. And and he was right. Like, to be fair, like, he was right. But if we're being honest, like, context and prompt engineering takes fucking time, dude. Like, a lot of time. And then my friend was like, well, you can just ask the AI to do it for you. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. But like, really, the context that matters is what's bespoke to the thing. So the company, the role, the hiring manager, that's when it gets magical. And so if you're able to rely on data we already have versus creating that data from zero, that's the thing, because it's just a copy and paste for whoever the HR or recruiting person is to go drop it in and start running these experiments versus having to come up with these very long prompts. Like, if someone told me to describe you, I'd be like, oh, like, amazing CEO, like has red hair, like sometimes it's funny. Like, it'd take me a while. It'd take me like weeks to come up with actually how I think about you versus let's actually make these performance reviews worth something, right? Versus like this, like, we all do the performance review. We think about it for like a week. We get our comp and we never think about it again.
Yeah. I would say also what you're describing is unstructured data. Because like you could explain to someone what I look like, or you could show them a picture.
Yeah.
And then they just totally get it. And like the AI gets that now as well. And it's sort of the same thing where you're saying, well, actually, all of the transcripts are unstructured data. Actually, our performance reviews are unstructured data. Previously, it didn't even occur to me to do a sort of a mapping between these things, because that would literally be, need a team of 1,000 people, like a big study to work this out. Whereas now, literally, I can get some interesting insights just by spending 15 minutes giving an LLM some of these files, and it intuits what these things are. I don't even always have to tell it that this is an interview. It'll work it out. Hey, this looks like an interview. Okay, this person's got the same name as this person. This is probably the same. Like, it will literally work that stuff out. And so it's just the cost because you can now use unstructured data without having to spend all the time structuring it. The AI does it for you. You're just opening up a whole new, it's a whole new ball game.
Exactly. And so this is the last point I want to leave people with, which is, so I keep, like, my deep, dark anxiety is I am going to become antiquated because of AI. And I know I'm not the only person to have this thought, but like probably like one of the few in recruiting who's saying it as publicly as I am. And so I think what I started to implement was I carve out time now on Friday afternoon. It's like the only time I really have outside of like other transactional things that have to get done throughout the course of my week, to spend time following my curiosity and just experimenting with these things. So if you remember, Google had 20% time, and that's where Gmail was famously created. I think recruiters need to institute 10% time. And it's just 10%, just get in there and start toying with these things and, call your homies up, like share ideas. Like, this isn't like go lock yourself in the Apple lab where you have to like check your phone in and like your parents and wife don't know where you are. This is like, tell people what you're doing to stimulate new ideas so you can follow that curiosity. That's the way that we're not going to become antiquated, because I said this on LinkedIn this week. AI is not going to replace us. Somebody who is good at using AI will.
Truth.
So let us know what you guys think about this episode. We're going to do this a bit more often because Sile and I have many things that we want to say that we're not finding time for. And if you guys have ideas on things that we should cover, hit us up. Thanks, guys.